The outcome of the 2020 United States presidential election is already poised on a knife edge because of President Donald Trump's contentious declaration of victory, even as vote counting continues. President Trump has instituted a series of lawsuits to stop the ballot counting in a number of battleground states. And on Twitter, his relentless assault on the electoral process is alive and kicking. But his choice of language has prompted social media firms to isolate his posts for serious censorship. But the more worrying part for most Americans is the effect the president's protestations seem to be having on his Republican Party support base, with many of them now galvanized to the point of calling for an armed insurrection in the event of former Vice President and Democratic Party candidate Joe Biden being declared the winner of the contest. Arise London correspondent and specialist analyst on U.S. politics, Laurie Laird, now joins us for an update. Good morning, Laurie.
Good morning. Nice to join you all this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Well, this looks like really a nail-biting, knife-edge race. Earlier on, I said that the margin in Georgia was 1,200. This morning, I had quoted 1,709. I had quoted 1,200. Now it's down to 665. And it's the same pattern that we're seeing in other places. What should we be looking forward to? What are the latest developments, Laurie?
You're right. I'm hearing 665 in Georgia as well, which is as tiny a margin as you can get. And Georgia really was not a state that Joe Biden had hoped to win. And he's not winning yet, but he is closing that gap. Georgia was something that the Democrats had actually written off. Joe Biden did a late campaign stop in Georgia, but it was a little bit half-hearted. I'm truly surprised that the vote in Georgia has come down to this low a margin. This really is a must-win state for Donald Trump. Let's look at the bigger picture here, although I'm with you. Georgia is absolutely fascinating. And before I digress, it's fascinating for another reason, because neither of the Senate seats that were up for grabs on Tuesday were decided in Georgia. Both of those will go to a runoff in early January. Georgia is one of the few states that insists that Senate candidates get more than 50% of the vote. Otherwise, there's a second race. Both of these races will go to a second vote. If the Democrats win both of those races, one will be a little bit easier to win than the other. That means that the Democrats could actually hold 50 seats in the Senate compared to 50 seats to the Republicans. So Georgia, to a certain extent, is the epicenter of what's going on right now. But let's look around. Let's see what we've got. Joe Biden ahead in Arizona. His lead is narrowing a little bit, but he's still up by, I've got him up by about 47,000 votes, with just over 200,000 left to call. It's not entirely clear when we will get another update from Arizona. Nevada, Joe Biden also up by a tiny amount there, 11,000. And the electoral authorities in Nevada have made it pretty clear that they're in no rush to really hurry up this vote. One of the electoral commissioners was on television yesterday and said, look, we have a couple of days to take new votes that are coming in that may have been postmarked on the 3rd. It could be the weekend before we get a result. So that's where we are in the two states where Joe Biden is leading. Now let's go to the other crucial state, Pennsylvania. What is going on there? Pennsylvania is the biggest prize left on the electoral map with its 20 electoral votes. Donald Trump had a huge lead there in early voting. But when these mail-in votes are being collected, Joe Biden is chipping away at that lead. Last I saw, Joe Biden down by 18,000 votes, but more than 150,000 votes left to be tallied. So Georgia and Pennsylvania still very much in play. Late yesterday, the electoral commissioner in Pennsylvania said that she had hoped to have a result late last night. That didn't happen. Will we see something out of Pennsylvania today? Hard to tell, but that's what we will be keeping an eye on, Georgia and Pennsylvania. I think the big question everybody has is, will we have a winner today? And I can tell you with absolute certainty, maybe.
Okay. So what do you make of the claims by the President of the United States, of all people, of the intentional electoral fraud being perpetrated as we speak? Obviously, there are people on the left who will completely reject those claims, people on the right who will accept them. But what is the general mood with regards to those claims?
I mean, it was, I found that press conference difficult to listen to. Donald Trump opened by saying that the Democrats are stealing the election. They are trying to steal the election. And that furthermore, the pollsters who predicted a Democratic landslide were doing that intentionally. He said that they were trying to suppress the Republican vote by calling the, pre-calling the election, saying it was going to go to the Democrats. There is absolutely no evidence that this is the case. And I think we can assume that if there were evidence, that Donald Trump would have presented it. He talked a little bit about voting areas that had blackened out their windows so nobody could see. But his evidence was pretty vague, nothing that we have heard verified, not to mention somewhat incoherent. If voters had been suppressed, then why on earth is Donald Trump or Joe Biden's lead in Nevada actually narrowing as more votes are coming in? Furthermore, in two of the states in question with these very tight votes, they're run by Republicans. Georgia is run by a Republican governor, Brian Kemp, who has made himself a big supporter of Donald Trump. So there was a bit of cognitive dissonance in his comments. And that said, as shocking as we found his comments, Donald Trump told us this was exactly the strategy he was going to pursue. He said that he did not believe in mail-in ballots. He did not believe that they were fair, did not believe they should be counted. So despite the fact that his rhetoric is pretty strong, and in some cases a Republican ex-governor of Pennsylvania called them incendiary, despite that, he pretty much told us that this is what he was going to do. Now, the Republicans have filed lawsuits in many jurisdictions, and the lawsuits are asking for a number of different things. One that was filed in federal court in Pennsylvania did not go very far, and it was actually had a bit of an amusing tone to it. A federal judge appointed by George Bush the Elder, a man called Paul Diamond, was set to hear the case, and he essentially mocked the lawyers representing Donald Trump. This case was about whether enough Republican observers in polling stations or counting stations in Pennsylvania. The judge asked the Republican lawyer, do you have observers in the ground in this particular voting station? And the lawyer said, we have a non-zero number of observers. Non-zero implying that, yes, there were observers on the ground. The judge essentially said, why are you wasting my time? And for good measure, told the Republican lawyer not to give up his day job. Yeah, I mean, it really was rather amusing. That case ended with the judge basically ordering the Republicans and the Democrats to each put a defined number of observers in the counting booth and go away and don't waste his time. So far, we haven't seen any of the lawsuits that Donald Trump has threatened gain much traction. That's not to say that some of them won't. I mean, I think that will be the next step for the Republicans. They're gonna legislate through this. I think we'll see lawsuits flying all over the place.
Okay, Laurie. Real quickly, I just want to just narrow down on Georgia, because Georgia is quite exciting. A lot of people say the reason for the Democratic Party push in Georgia is because, you know, the landscape has changed. You have a lot more young people coming into the Atlanta metro area where the Democratic Party is getting a lot of votes. And I want to look at that senatorial race between John Ossoff, a 33-year-old Jewish man, and David Perdue, the former president of Reebok. How is that going over there? It's quite an exciting race, and it's going to be pushed to the wires now.
That one is absolutely fascinating, and particularly because Perdue held the Republican candidate, held the lead throughout counting, and he had a really big lead when counting started. It was chipped away, narrowed. In the event, he won by about just over 2 points, if I remember correctly. He didn't get that 50% margin, so that goes to a runoff on January 5th. Now, that will be the tighter of the two Senate races, and I'm glad you brought this up because this this is a fascinating race. The other one is between Kelly Loeffler, who took the seat, was appointed into the seat just to finish out a term. She ran against the Democrat African-American Raphael Warnock. He won by about 7 points. So that one, when it goes to a runoff, is likely to favor the Democrat. But that tight one, where Perdue has that tiny lead, that's the one we'll be watching come January. If the Democrats win in both of those, again, it looks like we'll have a 50-50 tie in the Senate. When that happens, the incumbent vice president can break the tie. So it makes the winner of the presidential election, again, that more important. If Joe Biden wins it, it means Kamala Harris would break the tie. If Donald Trump wins it, it means Mike Pence breaks the tie. So we have control of the Senate, as you rightly point out, up for grabs as well.
Well, Laurie, 2 days ago, we were talking about Wisconsin and Michigan, but that would seem to have been decided. Now, it's Georgia and Pennsylvania, it appears. And you commented on Georgia earlier. How strategic is Pennsylvania? I know Georgia has 16 electoral votes, Pennsylvania 20. And what do you think could emerge at the end of the day? Why does Pennsylvania in particular matter?
I mentioned earlier, the Pennsylvania Electoral Commissioner had hoped to give us a result sometime yesterday. That has slipped, so perhaps we will see something today. Pennsylvania is the result that I think is probably most open to litigation. This is the one that I think where the Republicans may get some traction in going to the courts. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court agreed to allow votes received up until today to be counted. So in theory, that means that we might not get a result in Pennsylvania for a couple of days yet, because votes that haven't been received could still count. Now, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court agreed to allow those. The Republicans took that case to the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court upheld the Pennsylvania ruling in a 4-4 tie. Amy Coney Barrow, the newest appointee, or the newest to join the bench, did not vote on that one. So despite the fact that the tie, the draw in the Supreme Court means that the lower court, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruling stands, the National Supreme Court said, look, we're happy to revisit this if you bring us evidence, if it looks like there's any shenanigans going on the actual day. So that case is still live. Some of those votes that have arrived after the 3rd have been sequestered. It's not clear whether they've been counted yet, but Pennsylvania vote counters are preparing for further litigation and putting those votes aside. Because the Supreme Court, the National Supreme Court, has agreed to potentially hear this again, this could be the place where we see, there's, I think, most likely to see some serious litigation. So to make things cleaner, it would be very nice if whoever emerges the victor, that Pennsylvania does not become a factor there. Donald Trump does not have a path to win without Pennsylvania right now. But if Joe Biden were to win, if Pennsylvania were not the key state, it might help his legitimacy, because it means that Supreme Court, that litigation, is put aside. That said, whoever wins this race, 50% of the country is going to feel aggrieved. It is going to mean that whoever is president next is going to be lacking a degree of legitimacy with half of the population. It could make governing pretty tough.
This is the thing, especially with the Senate race shaping up the way it's done. Even the House race, I mean, the Democrats managed to hold the House, but it's not a super majority. But I wanted to ask you about that as well. This theory that the election has been rigged, it's been stolen, why on earth is that even plausible, even in certain minds? Surely the Democrats would have stolen the Senate as well.
You raise a very good point there. I mean, if the Democrats are trying to steal this election, they haven't done a very good job of it. They certainly did not do as well in this election as polls would have, led them to believe. Remember, Joe Biden had a 10, at some points 12% lead in the national polls. Some of the state polls were showing a more narrow lead. But if they're trying to rig things, they're not very good at it.
Clearly.
Right. Real quickly, if I can just put this in, Laurie, can you just quickly make us understand the path to victory for Joe Biden once again? Quickly.
Well, Joe Biden has a couple of paths to victory, and I hope you don't mind if I look down. If he were to take Nevada and Arizona, he will be at 270. Basically, if Joe Biden wins any two of the outstanding 4 states, he is golden, I believe. That is correct. So any two of the outstanding 4 states, and he is there. On the other hand, Donald Trump has to win Pennsylvania and either Arizona and Georgia. So Joe Biden's path a little easier, but I think that it's still too early to call.
Well, Laurie, just before we go, very quickly, what do we know about Jill Biden, who is likely to become the next First Lady of the United States? We know Melania Trump, but we hear she's already packing her things out of the White House. Some people claim.
Oh my gosh, that's a really good question. Certainly Jill Biden has been much more politically active than Melania Trump, and often when you see Melania, she looks like she wants to be anywhere but the White House. I'm basing this certainly just on my observations of Melania. She was not particularly engaged in the politics, where Jill Biden has very much been a visible part of the campaign. She has been a proxy for her husband in campaigning. She has a doctorate in education, so it may be that she wants to get involved in policy making there. She certainly feels like a first lady more in the mold of Hillary Clinton than in the mold of Melania Trump.
Well, thank you very much, Joel. I said Joel. Thank you very much, Laurie Laird.